Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Lord of the Flies. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the lovely but devastating character of Simon. I'm going to talk you through some of the key ways that Golding presents him, and we'll be having a think about what his overall significance is on the island. So let's get started.
Let's talk about why Golding created this character called Simon. First of all, just a quick thought. If you haven't finished reading the novel, there are going to be some serious spoilers in this presentation and in the next few seconds. So I just wanted to give you fair warning, okay? Spoilers coming up. So Simon is without doubt the symbol of goodness on the island. Out of all of the boys, he's the only person that sort of remains pure of heart. All of the other characters have really quite unpleasant features, where Simon seems to have only redeeming features. Yet he is still an outsider and he's still a victim. So as much as he's the symbol of goodness, he's also, like Piggy, a victim of this cruel world that is created, where as savagery rises, those who are different or other in some way will ultimately be punished. And so in some ways, Simon's goodness is irrelevant because it's saying through his death, there's the spoiler, that goodness actually can't survive. Thank you, Golding, for that wonderfully bleak thought on a bank holiday Monday. Right, let's get started looking at some of the details. Okay, so how is he described straight off? First description of him, even though it doesn't name him. One of the boys flopped on his face in the sand and the line broke up. They heaved the fallen boy to the platform and let him lie. He's always throwing a feint, said Merridew. So first thing to be aware of, Simon is in the choir, yeah? The boys know him, he knows the boys. That's very important for something I'll talk about later on. But the fact that the first moment demonstrates a weakness and a vulnerability in Simon, the fact that he faints in the heat and then is kind of just like plopped on the ground, is Golding foreshadowing the fact that he will be a victim of the boys later on. And in this moment, he's actually a victim of Jack, because the reason that he faints is because Jack won't let them take their cloaks off in this burning heat. So it does tie his kind of victim status to Jack and the rest of the boys, the choir, that become the hunters. So that's quite a nice little subtle development for you. And then the first description of his sort of physical appearance was that he was a small, skinny boy with his chin pointed and eyes so bright that they deceived Ralph into thinking him delightfully gay and wicked. So he's got this lovely sort of mischievous and bright look to him. But the fact is that Ralph is deceived in his first moment. So there's a kind of expectation just by the look of him that he's going to be all, bright and mischievous, like I said. That's what it means by delightfully gay and wicked. But actually, that's not who Simon is. He is a quieter, calmer, softer human being. Let's look at this notion of him being the symbol of goodness. So one of the first times that we see this true goodness is in chapter 2, Fire in the Mountain, when Jack is denying Piggy the right to speak because of him not having a kind of role in the creation of the fire. It ties in with the moment where Jack says the conch doesn't work on the top of the mountain. And Simon defends him. We used his specs. He helped that way. Now, you might think this is quite a throwaway little moment when he defends Piggy. But what he's actually doing is defending Piggy from Jack, a character that he knows well. So he is willing to sacrifice his own standing and endanger himself, because, facing the wrath of Jack, for a boy that he doesn't know. So his goodness shines through. Another really quotable moment demonstrating his goodness is when he's going off to his, to Simon's place, his little place of peace. When he gets the fruit for the other boys. Amid the roars of the bees in the afternoon sunlight, Simon found for them the fruit that they could not reach, pulled off the choicest from up in the foliage, and passed them back down to endless outstretched hands. So there are a couple of things here. There's a sort of risk to self, if you imagine all of these bees everywhere. The fact that he goes high up, he doesn't just grab anything. This superlative here, the choicest, he picks the best. He doesn't keep any of them for himself, and he passes them out to the endless outstretched hands. Note the hyperbole. Now, this is one of many biblical allusions. There's a lot of evidence there that Golding used references to Christ in particular, but not limited to Christ, in depicting Simon's character. And so the idea of the endless outstretched hands and turning something quite small into something huge is very much an allusion to the feeding of the 5,000. So that really, contextually, that really cements Simon's goodness. Other very important part of Simon's character is his greater understanding of the world around him, the circumstances that they are in, but also the broader world and the darkness of man. So I've got 3 quotes here that are useful. This one's taken from chapter 4, when the ship has been missed because the fire is out. Simon looked now from Ralph to Jack as he had looked from Ralph to the horizon, and what he saw seemed to make him afraid. In some ways, that's the bit that you need. He realizes in this moment that the split that is happening between Jack and Ralph is going to be fundamentally damaging to their world. And the fact that it's like the way that he looked from Ralph to the boat, seeing how far the boat was away, the fact that it was going, he now looks at Ralph and Jack and goes, right, you are separate. So that shows that he's intuitive, he's empathetic, he's insightful. But it's bigger than that as well. In chapter 5, when they're trying to establish what the beast is, or if there is a beast, very quotable, Simon became inarticulate in his attempt to express mankind's essential illness. He understands that there is an aspect of man, a natural part of mankind, that is dark, that is corrupted, that is sick. And he develops this point, Golding develops this point in chapter 6, when they're going to hunt the beast. And Simon is struggling to imagine this beast with teeth and claws. And instead, before his inward sight, he sees a picture of a human at once heroic and sick. Now, that juxtaposition in those adjectives, heroic and sick, is really important, because the kind of human that Simon is imagining in his head when he thinks of the beast is a soldier. Heroic, going out to war. Sick, able to kill a lot of people. And so Simon really here seems to be the mouthpiece for Golding. He is the one thinking and expressing Golding's views that mankind is essentially corrupted. And he gets that influence from his experiences in World War II, which I'll talk to you about a little bit more in the coming moments. Okay. We do need to talk about biblical allusion a little bit more. I'm only going to give you a couple, because the one thing that I don't like to see in student essays is when Simon essays just become a list of biblical allusions, and you're almost like you're going, oh, I'm getting all of my context from biblical allusion. And yeah, it's fine, but there's so much more to say. So you've had the outstretched hands one. I'm going to give you a couple more. This one I think is a cracking one. You'll get back where you came from. This is a moment where he's comforting Ralph. Yeah, so you could just look at that as kindness if you want. But the biblical allusion comes in, or the link to Christ comes in, when you consider whether or not he's foretelling his own death, which Jesus Christ obviously did. It's important that when he speaks to Ralph, he says, you'll get back where you came from, not we'll get back. And he says it a couple of times. So there is this assertion that there's a part of him that knows that he's not getting off the island. And then the kind of final kind of moments for Simon, obviously before the horrific death, but when he goes off to his place. This whole section is really, really interesting, where you've got the tempting of Simon. So this is the first little bit that I'm just giving to you here, but you can find more quotes of this ilk. He shifted restlessly, but there was no avoiding the sun. Presently he was thirsty, and then very thirsty. He continued to sit. This is meant to be like the fasting of Jesus when he went out into the wilderness and didn't eat or drink for 40 days. And then in this moment, he's tempted by the devil. And so you've got this kind of idea of Simon almost being in a fasting state. And then Simon is tempted by the Lord of the Flies, which, as we know, is Hebrew for Beelzebub, which is, of course, a synonym for the devil, or another way of referring to the devil. And in this moment of temptation, the Lord of the Flies is trying to get Simon to almost deny his greater knowledge of what the beast is, and is saying, just go back and just be a normal boy and play. He's trying to get him to sort of denounce the faith he has, or the understanding he has in what the beast is, which is knowledge that could protect and save the boys. And this knowledge he gains, obviously, just before he dies, when he goes off and finds, there's a lovely moment, I should have put this quote in, where he says, what else is there to do? And then he goes up to the mountain and he finds the parachutist and gains the knowledge. Which of course happens just before Simon's death, which we cannot ignore. Any essay on Simon has got to feature Simon's death. Okay, that is a hard and fast rule. So this is the news that he understands at the top of the mountain before he goes down to see the boys. The beast was harmless and horrible. Okay, lovely juxtaposition there in these adjectives. Harmless because it's not real, it's just a man who's crashed to earth, but horrible because it's a dead body and it's a horrifying sight. The news must reach the others as soon as possible. Note the kind of modal verb of necessity there, how important and urgent it is that they understand that this version of the beast they've created is not real. There is such irony in the fact that Simon is coming to the children with the knowledge that the beast isn't real, and he dies because they mistake him for the beast. And here this is. The beast was on its knees in the centre, its arms folded over its face. It was crying out against the abominable noise, something about a body on the hill. Ugh, it breaks my heart. So what we have here is this really confused narrative. Golding is employing something called third person narrative limited, which is where it still remains third person, but it's very clearly from the perspective of a character. But in this case, it's just the mass of boys, the perspective that they see, and that is why they describe Simon as the beast, because in the mind of the boys, it is the beast that has come crawling out. Okay, but we as the reader know it's Simon because we can also see the vulnerability in the descriptions, crying out, arms folded over its face. So in this moment, the boys see the beast in Simon, and then they themselves become the beast. There were no words and no movements, but the tearing of teeth and claws. They savage Simon to death, beating and biting at him. What painful irony. Simon himself in chapter 5 said, maybe there is a beast, maybe it's only us. And here is where that comes true. They mistake Simon for the beast, and then they become the beast in the way that they destroy him. Now, contextually, this is an important moment. Quite often people just whack in the kind of Golding war stuff, wherever in an essay, but really it needs to be saved for the moments of atrocity. You need to compare atrocity for atrocity. Now, we know that Golding went to war, he was a naval officer, and we know that he had really, really strong opinions about the atrocities committed by both sides. That is key to understanding this book. Golding was not saying bad Nazis. He was saying bad Nazis and bad British and bad American and bad everyone who gets involved in this kind of blind killing. Because he himself bombed a town and found that he had killed loads of civilians, and it created such grief because he, feeling that he was one of the good guys, committed this atrocity. You can link this to Simon's death because everyone takes part in it, including our resident good guys, Ralph and Piggy. So Simon's death is written to demonstrate the truth in the fact that the beast, metaphorically, is within the boys, that they are all capable of this id-based violence, but it also proves the fact, that this illness, the cruelty of man, is in everyone, because even under the influence of fear, even Ralph and Piggy are complicit in Simon's death. And Simon's death is so significant and sad for a couple of reasons outside of that. We have been saying oh, Golding uses biblical allusion. He links Simon to Christ. So there's almost a kind of sense of optimism in that. And if you look at the way that Simon is described post-death, it's quite beautiful, where, you know, the luminescence of the, you know, the creatures in the sea. I don't know if you've seen, it's so beautiful when you see the bright shining lights. I can't remember what they're called. But here they are dressing Simon, the sort of luminescence of them dressing Simon and making him silver. The fact that it silvers his cheek and his shoulder becomes sculptured marble. It's like elevating his status up, something to be worshipped like Christ. And again, he's turned into a silver shape underneath the stars. He moves out towards the open sea. It's very beautiful. It's far more respectful and dignified than poor Piggy, whose head just comes open and stuff comes out and he's sucked under the waves. So you've got this sort of beautiful description of how nature takes him back. But the allusions, the biblical allusions, stop. Because if you were feeling hopeful in this moment, you might say, yes, he's a symbol of goodness and he's related to Jesus Christ. But why did Christ die? Oh, so that our sins could be forgiven. And then he was resurrected 3 days later. So it's all going to be okay. But no, the biblical allusion ends. Simon is not resurrected. He didn't die for the sins. He didn't wipe the slate clean. In fact, when Simon dies, that symbol of goodness is eradicated and all they are left with is savagery. Because actually, if you then look at the way that the violence escalates, you go from Simon's death, which brutally violent, but in some ways still a misunderstanding, to very, very intentional murder. Piggy, and then the attempt on Ralph's life. Sorry, that was so bleak, but don't blame me. Blame William Golding and blame the exam boards that keep Lord of the Flies on their curriculum. Thank you very much. I hope that was helpful, if a little depressing. Give me a shout if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments and I will get back to you. Otherwise, happy revising.